There is still no winner in the U.S. election, but there are some encouraging signs for Democratic challenger Joe Biden. The former vice president has picked up wins in some closely fought states. President Trump, meanwhile, is facing an increasingly difficult path to win re-election. He's launched legal challenges aimed to stop vote counting in several tight races, a call echoed by his supporters. In Arizona, a group of Trump supporters have been gathering to protest the ongoing vote counting there. That race is neck and neck, though several news outlets have reported Joe Biden has flipped the battleground state. Trump has made unfounded allegations of voter fraud and on Wednesday accused Democrats of trying to steal the election. So here's a look at the results so far, with some closer attention given to states that have yet to declare a winner. Our figures showed Biden currently on 264 and President Trump on 214. That puts Joe Biden just 6 electoral college votes away from the 270 needed to win the presidency. Wisconsin has become the latest state to fall into the Biden column. Its 10 electoral votes, which Trump won in the last election, now go to his Democratic challenger. That brings us to Nevada, which has exactly the 6 votes that are on offer that Biden needs for the White House. He currently has a slim edge in that state. In Georgia, meanwhile, 16 electoral votes are on the table, with Trump leading the way. But his margin has narrowed in the state. The Trump campaign has filed a lawsuit alleging that ineligible late absentee ballots may have been added to the count. Pennsylvania is the biggest prize still up for grabs with 20 electoral votes. The president currently holds a narrow lead there, but again, remaining mail ballots are expected to favor the Democrats. Well, the wire service AP, which is our main source for election data, shows Biden has taken Arizona, but some other major news agencies have not yet called that state, so there's still a bit of a question mark there. Now, the bottom line at this point, vote counting is still underway, but the path to victory appears to have narrowed for President Trump. Let's get a live update from Washington now. Our chief political editor, Michaela Kufner, is standing by there. Michaela, votes are still being counted. Are things any clearer now than they were 24 hours ago?
Well, we're clearly seeing a tendency that Joe Biden is actually at least narrowing the margin where Donald Trump is ahead in several contested states, although it still does remain a nail-biter. And with many networks not having called Arizona yet, the focus is on Georgia and Arizona as the potential ticket to reach 270 for Joe Biden. That also explains why Joe Biden came out earlier today and said he was confident that he would win. On the other hand, we're seeing Trump's camp basically file several lawsuits, which a Republican legal expert on national television here has referred to as Hail Mary lawsuits, meaning that when a candidate realizes that it's getting very tight, this could be a tactic not just to win a suit over individual ballots, but to potentially delay results being declared, which could then change the whole process unless that lawsuit can be resolved by the time the Electoral College gathers on the 14th of December. So there's still a couple of legal aces potentially up Donald Trump's sleeve, but behind closed doors, you can already hear from Republicans that they're not for it. This is clearly something that Donald Trump wants to push ahead with, and he's clearly on the defensive here.
Yesterday, Michaela, the discussion was very much about Midwestern states. Today, the focus is more diffuse. We're looking at states like Georgia. What's the situation there?
Yes, because all of a sudden, Joe Biden looks like he's the first one in many years to get a chance to turn Georgia the Democrat way. And throughout even this night, we've seen that initial margin where Trump was leading melt away from some 33,000 votes ahead to some 23,000. And we're expecting fresh data to come out of Georgia throughout this night at some stage, and that could very well seal the presidency for Joe Biden, or it would signal that, yes, Donald Trump still has a mathematical pathway to remain president.
What are we to make of the Trump campaign claiming voter fraud in the counting process, etc.? Is the voting system in the U.S. not considered very reliable?
Well, he certainly has himself stated several times that he doesn't believe in it. He said on Pennsylvania, which has 20 electoral college votes, that he thinks very bad things are happening there. I had the chance to actually ask the head of the Election Observer Mission, the International Observer Mission here in the United States, of her assessment, her team's assessment of the elections here.
In his statements, he has undermined the voters' confidence in the electoral process. That is a fact. We have that on record. And the challenges that are faced here in the United States is rebuilding that trust in the system. Hopefully, the work that we've been doing here, very fact-based, will also serve in some measure to reassure people that how this election actually was conducted and that we did not find systemic evidence of wrongdoing.
She was stating there that Donald Trump is at least partly to blame for many people having their trust in the system undermined here, and that also is quite clear from the written statement that came out. At the same time, the international observers gave the electoral system and how it was run throughout these elections, including the very high level of transparency, top marks. So Donald Trump really will have to put in some effort to push forward with that narrative to undermine confidence here.
Michaela, thank you very much. That was DW's Michaela Kufner in Washington. So how are Americans coping with this uncertainty? Our reporters went out on the streets of Washington, D.C. to gauge the mood.
Today is a very tense day for many Americans. I believe personally as a Republican that Trump won in a landslide, but because of COVID and the ballots, that 300,000 ballots overnight were found in every city in the swing states for Biden.
I think that the elections are just another reminder about how divided the country is right now. It's remarkable that, almost half of Americans think that Donald Trump is the single worst person to be president, and the other half think that he's the single best person to be president.
I'm just overwhelmed. I am so stressed out. Yesterday it was like, anxiety, but this morning I broke down and cried because of the possibility that Trump might be in office again.
My mom was saying earlier she feels really misled by the polls. I'm not really up to feeling angry at anyone. I'm just feeling sad.
Well, U.S. voters there commenting on the unclear outcome of Tuesday's ballot. DW's Peter Ruller-Dahl has been following this election from the beginning. Peter, many people were concerned going into this election that there could be unrest if the vote count wasn't clear or if it's contested. Well, the vote count is not really clear. It seems to be contested. Are we seeing any unrest?
Well, we definitely saw, a lot of preparations for that. A lot of cities boarding up more or less in anticipation of, violent clashes. We didn't really see a lot of that yesterday in the immediate wake of the election results coming in. But as the race has gotten tighter, we are seeing to see pockets of, if not unrest, at least, increasing tension, protest outside several election centers. In Michigan, we saw a pro-Trump supporters crowd an election center there. Right here in Arizona, what we're seeing here in Maricopa County, where we're expecting new results any minute now, we've seen Trump supporters essentially gathering there for for hours. That is a race that has been tightening dramatically in Arizona. Biden is currently leading, but it's also a state that Trump won by just 90,000 votes, half of which came from that county. We're awaiting about 15% of the ballots there are still left to be counted. So anything could really happen. So a lot of tension, a lot of uncertainty right now.
Anything could happen. Well, Donald Trump's lawyers they're saying they're going to file legal challenges in a number of key states, particularly ones where Donald Trump is not doing so well. This could really still get messy, couldn't it?
It absolutely could. I mean, the Trump campaign is currently considering legal action or has already filed lawsuits in Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, where there was a decision ahead of the election to extend the amount of time that they could count votes, especially these mail-in ballots that have been so contested. In Wisconsin, where Biden is up by less than 1%, which allows Trump to demand a recount if it stays that way. Essentially, this means that even if Biden backs Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, which would take him to 306 electoral votes, which is exactly the same amount of votes that Trump got in 2016. Biden currently has a popular vote lead of more than 3.5 million. By any measure, that would be a very decisive victory. But it could
popular
still
vote does not count.
It does not count. But even
if
he wins all these, gets to 306 electoral votes or more, we could still see. It could still take weeks before we see an official result.
Peter, thank you very much. That was DW's Peter Dahl.
Thank you.
Well, we're into a second day without a conclusive result in the 2020 U.S. election. While there's little to back up claims that doubt the integrity of this election, this wouldn't be the first time the U.S. vote counting process has come under scrutiny and taken more than a few days to name a winner.
November 2000. Republican presidential candidate George W. Bush seems to win Florida. But the results are so close that the rules demand a recount. The whole election hangs in the balance. Democratic candidate Al Gore requests a manual recount in certain counties. Recounting by hand took a long time. A legal battle slowed vote counting down, and the state overshot the safe harbor date, December 8th. This allowed the Bush campaign to ask the Supreme Court to stop a new statewide recount, which it did. Bush was declared the winner by a margin of just a few hundred votes. Fast forward to this November, another election without an immediate result. The established law in some states is that counting early and mail-in ballots can only start on Election Day. And this year, the corona pandemic meant millions of people voted that way. Counting all these ballots takes, guess what, a long time. We don't know how long yet, but that December 8th safe harbor deadline is starting to become visible on the horizon. President Trump has already said he intends to use lawsuits to slow down or stop state counts, which could push them past the safe harbor date and make them vulnerable to challenges. His first comments after polls closed pointed towards this. He falsely said counting votes after Election Day was illegal.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court.
His Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, had been expecting this and tried to take the wind out of Trump's sails.
We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished.
If undeclared states miss the safe harbor date while there's still no overall result, the U.S. Congress and Supreme Court could get involved, bringing back memories of the bitterly divided 2000 contest.
Well, let's get some reaction from Europe now. Our Brussels bureau chief, Alexandra van Namen, is monitoring that for us. She joins us from Brussels. Alexandra, what do Europeans make of this U.S. election limbo?
Well, Brussels, the whole Europe is waiting, watching, holding its breath. And when we look at the heads of EU institutions and NATO and most of EU leaders, we have to say they are silent. They know what's at stake right now. But those politicians who did comment, they reacted mostly with dismay to President Trump's premature declaration of victory, to his allegations of fraud. Most of them saying that they are afraid that there could be a constitutional crisis in the United States that could have international implications. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, for example, also pointed to the deep polarization in the US, and Manfred Weber, the chairman of the European People's Party in the European Parliament, said that this polarization is a warning for Europe to take this issue seriously.
Transatlantic relations, Alexander, have been strained during Trump's presidency. You yourself covered the White House for quite a good chunk of that. Do you see any chance of those relations improving if Trump gets a second term?
If Trump gets a second term, then we have to say that many people here fear that that would be a disaster, a further damage to the transatlantic relations because of what Trump did. He pulled out of the climate agreement, Paris Climate Agreement. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, but also because he is someone who disrespects European institutions, international organizations. So it's really difficult to imagine how the European Union could work with him together to tackle those issues that matter to them.
How much of a difference would a Biden presidency then make for ties between Europe and the U.S.? What do you think?
Well, I think that there would be a huge difference. The Europeans are really hoping that if Joe Biden gets elected, there would be a change of the atmosphere, a friendlier tone between Europe and the United States. They want to see someone in the White House who they can rely on, who is predictable, who they can sit together and talk about those issues that I mentioned that are important to both Europe and the United States.
Alexander, thank you very much. That was DW's Alexander van Namen, our Brussels bureau chief.